Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Podcast. I'm your host, Graham Richmond, and this special episode is a continuation of our Admissions Director Q&A series. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Bruce DelMonico from the Yale School of Management. Bruce's title is Assistant Dean and Director of Admissions. He joined Yale SOM back in 2004 and has been leading admissions since 2006. Bruce has spent nearly 2 decades working in higher ed, and before Yale, Bruce was an attorney focused on First Amendment, white-collar, and commercial litigation. He holds degrees from Brown University, UT Austin, where he has an MA in English, and UVA, the law school there, where he has a JD. And also, Bruce, if memory serves, you are originally from New Haven, Connecticut. So welcome to the show, and can you confirm or deny this New Haven thing?
I can proudly confirm that I am indeed a New Haven native.
Yeah.
So thank you, Graham. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to talk to you and great to be here.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. I'm going to say, full disclosure, Bruce is one of my favorite people in the MBA universe, not only because we've known each other for a really long time, and he's an innovator and kind of leader in the space, but also because we're both really passionate about baseball, and we've actually seen some baseball games in different stadiums over the years. So just appreciate you making time to do this, Bruce, and I've been looking forward to it.
No, me as well. It's always great to catch up and always wonderful to talk. And the feeling is very much mutual.
Cool. So what we're going to do is I have a handful of questions. I don't know if you've listened to any of the other ones we've done with some of your peers, but handful of questions about admissions at Yale SOM. And then at the end, we'll do some fun questions so our listeners can get to know you. But before we kind of dive in, I just wanted you to tell me a little bit more about your background and the path that led you to your current role at Yale, just because, you were a lawyer. And so I'd love to hear the story of how did you end up in this role?
Yeah, no, you summarized, I think, very well. And it's true. I'm a recovering lawyer. I think you never completely get past it. But I did make a pivot. It's as you said, almost 2 decades ago. It's crazy to think that how much time has passed, going from practicing, from being a litigator to then being in higher ed. And I think the germs of it kind of were seeded starting back in college. I did some selection process work, not with the admissions office at Brown. But for counseling positions, I was a resident advisor and a resident counselor, and then I was on a committee and actually co-chaired a committee that's made selected other counselors at the university. And I really enjoyed that, and I kind of stored it in the back of my head that was a really fun experience. And then when I was in law school, I was on a committee for I think my entire time, 3 years, making awards for students who did public service internships. Mm-hmm. Again, that involved an application process. We would interview people, and I really, really liked that as well. And so that was the second data point that I kind of stored in the back of my head and said, gosh, what's most analogous to that? And what as I was kind of entering my legal career, as I'm thinking about sort of the longer term, what might that translate into in a more sort of professional context? And so, as I was thinking about, I guess I could have gone the route of sort of being a sort of lifelong lawyer and litigator, and I decided that I guess the other piece of it is I've always been interested in higher ed. You mentioned my degree from UT Austin. I was in a PhD program there, and decided to take a terminal master's so that I could go to law school because that's where my interests were kind of leading me. But I was at one time thinking about teaching, mm-hmm. These selection process experiences plus sort of the higher ed academia sort of teaching interests kind of combined those, and I thought admissions could be something that's really interesting. So it just happened to work out. My predecessor here at SOM, sort of wonderful woman named Ann Coyle. I reached out when she had an opening for a deputy director, and we hit it off. And her husband was a recovering lawyer, so she was so sympathetic to my plight. I was lucky enough to work under her for 2 years, and then when she moved on to a new role, I stepped into the director and now assistant dean position, and have really just enjoyed it ever since, and really not looked back.
Yeah, that's terrific. And it's funny, I hadn't thought about this as I'm reading off, where you went to school and everything. I hadn't realized, you've been through a competitive admissions process at, an Ivy League undergrad, and then UT Austin, which is a terrific school. Yep. Their MA in English program is good. And then, obviously law school is no walk in the park in terms of getting in. So you must be able to empathize with everyone who's listening today in terms of what it's like to apply to school.
Yeah, no, I think very much from my personal experience, and also, one thing, my oldest daughter is in her first year of college, and so I was, we just went through that process as well, and so definitely very much empathizing with the plight from that as well. But the one thing just as a So there's that piece, and also just as I think about people just connecting and we don't have to go down too far down the path, but connecting to people who are thinking about thinking about what should I do with my life. I tend to tell people think about what you like to do and sort of store those experiences and think about how that could translate. So instead of trying to think about this is the thing I need to do, think about what you've enjoyed doing in the past, and that's kind of what I did when I was crafting a career path. And obviously, no one when they're 7 or 8 years old says when I grow up I want to be an admissions officer, but they, it's a more of a found career. But there's a kind of accumulation of experiences that I kind of put together and said, okay, what would that look like as a career? And it's so far, at least knock on wood, it seems like it's worked out okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It sounds like it has. I guess this is a good kind of dovetail right into this next question, and I think you've reflected a little bit on it in telling your story. But I wonder, what do you like most about this job? And also, if you're willing, would you share something that maybe you don't like about this job too?
I'll try. And I did sort of hint at this in from the experiences I had in college and law school. The selection process work. There are different aspects of it that I like. One is, sort of the voyeuristic aspect of really seeing where people have come from and where they're going. And it's really, and being part of that process is really kind of uplifting and really to help people achieve their goals and sort of be part of them getting to where they're aspiring to be is very sort of uplifting and positive, as I said. And it's there is, as I said, that voyeuristic, just seeing what people have done. There's so many people with so many interesting backgrounds and so many unique experiences, and it's really just on a selfish level great to see that and really interesting to see that. So I think that's definitely one of the things I like, and I also do like the committee part, the committee process, and the communal part of the decision-making process. I'm an introvert by nature, and I think by default. This is a kind of a sort of communal thing that we do that I really, really enjoy. And I think not every school. I've been very protective of our committee process and making decisions by committee. Not every school does it that way, and I think it's a little bit more labor intensive. We can talk about that later on, but I think it is valuable in my mind and my experience for how we make decisions.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things I think are positive things I like. In terms of dislike, there's very little I dislike. One of the things I guess I would say is I don't like saying no. That's one other thing, and it's tough. You do have to say no in this job, and I think that's where it's kind of the empathy comes in, and just having gone through competitive admissions processes and seeing others going through it and knowing. And that's one of the things I try and tell people is, we say no more than I would like, unfortunately, but I do tell people, this is not. This is not a referendum on you. This is not, about a commentary on your potential and your quality as an applicant. It's or as a person. It's really just, are making a specific decision in this specific context and kind of doing the best we can as humans. So
yeah,
it's tough, and I don't really enjoy it.
Yeah, and I feel like others have mentioned that. And I think, I remember even when I was working in admissions that you have this feeling sometimes that you could fill the class at least a couple times over, with great people that you see, in the applicant pool. And so it's really challenging to kind of whittle things down.
Yeah.
Tell me about something new that's happening or maybe is going to be happening soon on campus that you wish more of our listeners knew about.
Yeah, I think, there's always, one of the next things, obviously as we're doing this, we're still kind of in this kind of COVID limbo stage where we're, fully in person at this point, but still, there are still restrictions. The Yale campus is now on green status, which is great, but, there's still limitations on who can be on campus and visitor policies and those types of things. So it's a little bit of an awkward period. But one thing that we have coming up is there have been restrictions on who can be on campus, and it's really been limited to students. But one of the important parts of our culture is actually sort of the partner culture, and we have lots of students coming with partners and with families, and we weekly. In normal times, we will have a weekly closing bell where it happens Thursday night, so we have classes Monday through Thursday, no classes on Friday. So Thursday evening, the school will sponsor basically a closing happy hour to celebrate the end of the school week. Mm-hmm. And this happens every week, and it's sponsored by different clubs and different focuses, depending on which club is sponsoring and different aspects to the experience. we haven't had that this semester, which is unfortunate, and partner access to campus has been limited. So before the holidays, we're going to have the school, and I don't think it's announced yet. But I think this probably will air after it's announced. So I'm taking a little bit of a liberty here. A big sort of closing bell that would include partners and families, and I think it's nice because it has been, I feel like we're such an inclusive environment and inclusive school, and not having the partners being part of the life of the school as they have been in the past has been a real challenge. And so having that happen, I think hopefully will be a nice celebration and a nice kind of a winding down of the fall semester.
Yeah, and I will say over the years, as we've done, real humans pieces with some of your students, like that close-knit support for partners, families, and just the nature of, people coming together, it's a smaller program, really stands out. So I can see how you'd be looking forward to that stuff sort of coming back online.
Yeah.
Let's hope that this is, the beginning of many more of those weekly gatherings as we head into the spring. We'll see.
Yeah. Let's hope so. Hopefully things do open up. But I do think, and there are other signs, that things are kind of starting to open up in terms of campus activity, and even our international experience trips are going to be happening this spring. They had been on hiatus, so fingers crossed that we continue in that direction. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's great. So tell me about a Yale SOM stereotype that you want to debunk.
I'm sure there are lots of them, and they probably go in different directions. That we're this or that. I think the one that I hear most common is that we're the nonprofit school, and it's tough. I don't want to debunk in the sense that we are incredibly strong in the social sector, and I think that's sort of well deserved and well earned. Our founding mission of educating leaders for business and society very much, envisions this multi-sector approach where we sort of bring together, students and leaders from not just the private sector, but the nonprofit and the public sectors. And we've had tremendous leaders across all sectors over the years. And so I don't think it's wrong to say that we're strong in the nonprofit space and maybe a leader in the nonprofit space and in the social sector more generally. When you look at things like rankings or other, we obviously are very well recognized there. But I think I don't like to think of it as a limiter. I don't think it's, I think there's some people who think, for example, 90% of our students go out into the sort of the nonprofit space, and it's actually been sort of on the decline of the last few years for different reasons, and I think there are sort of sensible reasons. But I think it's one area of strength, but it's not, it shouldn't be seen in a limiting sense. We think of ourselves as a very, very strong general management school. We educate our students to be leaders across all industries, all sectors, and we see that that's where they go, and that's what they do. And so I think that stereotype, to the extent people who are interested in investment banking or management consulting or CPG or technology or healthcare or any number of other areas think that, oh gosh, that's not the school for me. I think that's I think misguided, misplaced, and I think so to the extent people can see it's kind of an and thing, and plus, we're strong in the social space, but we're also strong in all these other areas, and we are a top, I think in my mind, a top 5 school, and I think the numbers show in all these areas, and so I think that's one thing I would want to debunk.
Yeah, and I think you're hitting on something that, I always like for when possible to draw like a broad lesson here. And I think anyone listening who wants to go by these stereotypes, whether it's for Yale or any other program, like look at the placement statistics and look at where people are going, do your homework, because I think it's sometimes really easy to affix a label to some programs and not dig into the details and see, that you guys have a lot of people, for example, heading into consulting and finance and tech and all these industries that you just mentioned. So I'm glad that you spoke to that one, because that is the one that I think comes up a lot. Yeah. So the next thing I wanted to ask you, and this is one that this is, just humor the applicants here. They want to know what happens when the file gets submitted, behind closed doors. Like they're pressing submit, and then they're sitting there waiting, first for an interview invitation if they're lucky, and then for a final decision. Can you walk us through like sort of the operation behind the scenes a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to do my best. And I think it is true. That's one of the challenging parts of being on the other side, being candid. It's you kind of hit submit, and then it's a bit of a black box. You might hear, with the interview invitation or other updates about where things stand, but it's not. It's a lot of waiting, and that's always so difficult.
Yeah.
We try to sort of communicate through the process, but there's never. I'm sure it's never enough. You never know. I think early on I had this idea that we could have this, real time status. Your file is being in the first read and then the second read and then this and that. And, I don't know if other schools have done that, but we were never really able to operationalize it in a way that made sense for the candidate experience. Mm-hmm. But in any event, it's a little bit of a digression. So after applicant hits submit, we don't start reviewing applications until after the deadline. We wait until all the applications are in, and so to the extent you as a candidate, you're trying to decide whether to submit, how early to submit. Obviously you don't want to wait till like the very last minute, at 11:59 and hitting the button, and you want to make sure you give yourself a little bit of time. But there's no benefit to submitting weeks or a month early because we won't be looking at your application until after the deadline anyway.
Okay.
But there is actually for us, so that's one piece of sort of, I guess, advice to offer. For us, the other thing I would say is we. Some of the schools might have some aspects of this, but we do have some elements that are unique to us that are actually post-submission. So after you hit submit, you get invited to complete both our video question component of the application and the behavioral assessment, which are two sort of, I think other schools have some aspect of the video question. I think we're the only school that does the behavioral assessment, and so you get invited to participate in both of those elements. Those are post submission. You usually have a few days, sometime less than a week to complete those, and then those elements get added to your file and included in the review process as well.
Okay.
So once this all happens after the deadline, the first thing we do is actually we all sit down as a committee, and again, this is where I think the committee process is helpful, and we do just a quick sort of high-level summary of what the round looks like, and then we go through and actually do start to sort of parcel out files in terms of reading, in terms of interviewing. We do it early on. We try to parallel path files as much as possible. If for nothing else, just to allow us to get through all the files, so that there's movement happening as many files as possible, as early as possible, so that you see activity and that things are happening. And then so we go through the read process, and every file is reviewed by two different members of the admissions committee at different points. And then we have a subcommittee, so a subset of the admissions committee that makes interview decisions. So as the reading happens, those we have multiple, usually it's about a sort of half dozen or more, what we call interview committees, where we make decisions on interviewing. That happens throughout the round as files are read and they become complete and ready to decide. And then closer to the end of the round, we have what's decision committee, and that's the full committee, and we're sitting together, although by Zoom right now, and we'll decide whether how long that continues, but sitting synchronously, we're sitting together making decisions on files, and we go one by one through the files, and as a full committee make decisions, which I think it's a little bit more labor intensive than I think some other structures. We could have it be a subset, we could have it be like single point decision maker, but this is the process I was brought into, and I very much believe in the value of the committee process and having the different voices heard and having the different perspectives presented in terms of the quality of the decisions we make. So it's more labor intensive, it's more time consuming, but I think it is a valuable part of the decision making process for us.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah. I mean, I was going to just interrupt and ask you if this is sort of a real nitpicky question, but I was curious because you talked about it. Does the person that reads the file, let's call them the second reader, do they see what the first person, said about it, or is it sort of blind, or however you would describe that?
Yeah, but I mean, blind is a term. The second reader does not see what the first reader wrote. Those comments are suppressed.
Right.
I mean, there are other aspects of the application we suppress as well. Which we could talk about to try to make sure we're minimizing bias as much as possible and not making decisions on things that are not relevant in our minds to the decision-making process, but that's one of them. We don't want the second reader to be influenced by what the first reader thought. So those are blind, and then the interview information is also something that is not visible to the readers until we sort of go into committee.
Okay, got it.
So to the extent that that's something that becomes available, earlier in the process.
Okay, got it. So another question about the application process. I think this has been a great run through of how it works on your end. I wanted to just kind of ask you if you had any tips, or you kind of if you had to give one key tip about approaching your application essay, what would it be?
Yeah, so about the essay specifically, ours is, everyone has a different essay and everyone's looking for different things. So every school is unique in that respect. So I won't say our essay topic is unique, but it is specific to us. It's described the biggest commitment you've ever made. It's something that we have been using for several years. We developed it in conjunction with Amy Wisniewski, who's one of our prominent organizational behavior faculty members, who does research on the meaning of work and what it means to have a job versus a calling. And so I think this is something that's particularly well suited for a business school essay and for her area. The one thing I would say is, I guess, actually, if we can stretch into maybe a couple of things, this is the universal aspect of this is to answer the question. I think every school will say that, so that applies to any essay you're writing is to answer the question. But for us, what that means is we're looking for a single commitment that you've made that you consider your biggest commitment, and we're really looking not for you to talk about sort of the behaviors that demonstrate that commitment. We're really looking for how you followed up on that commitment, and not more of a sort of a thought piece about sort of your philosophy behind it, or your why you. Although you can talk about why that's your biggest commitment, but really how you demonstrated you evidence that commitment and what you did to demonstrate a support for that commitment. So that's the thing I would say. Is probably the most important to know, and I guess the biggest tip I would provide about the essay specifically.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful. I agree with you. Everyone always says, "Oh, be authentic," answer the question, et cetera. But I think this sort of brass tacks, you got to pick something that you're committed to, and then talk about what you've done, to support that and things. That's really good.
Yep.
Good advice. So you guys are unique, though, in that you don't have an essay about applicants' career plans or even about their specific interest in Yale. Can you walk us through the rationale there? And is this something that gets tackled later in either in the interview or maybe in some of the other stuff, the sort of post submission tasks that you mentioned earlier? But yeah, just walk us through why you guys don't ask about those kind of very common questions.
Yeah, and I think there are a few things here, and one of them is that when we put together the application, we were very intentional about trying to think about what information we need at various points and having complementary pieces of information requested at different points. So we're not just kind of throwing everything at you at once, but we're kind of staggering and staging it and thinking about what to ask when and what context and what medium is best to ask certain pieces of information. And we tried to. For a number of reasons, we don't want to be redundant, and we want to be sensitive to the applicant experience and what you're going through and what you're having to put together and what you're having to say. So we do, I think, one thing. So in terms of the career piece and in terms of why Yale, that is part of the interview process. It's more the interview experience. We think that that's better able to be expressed there. But we do. So we don't. And we assume that if you're applying to us, you're applying because you're interested in coming to school with us. So we don't need to ask that necessarily.
Right.
We do ask in the application, there are a couple of short answers that talk about your career. There's one particular short answer that talks about your post-MBA career interests. So we do ask about it there. We don't ask about an essay because that's not what we're looking for in the essay. And we don't, I guess that's another piece of information that I would another tip is you don't have to try and shoehorn in your career interests or why Yale or why the MBA into your essay, because we do ask about that elsewhere. And so that's another reason for sort of just answering the question, because we ask for different pieces, as I said, of information at different points. And we're trying to, we then put it all together to create as sort of three-dimensional a picture as possible of you as a candidate. But we do ask, we have a short answer in the application where we ask about your post-MBA career goals. But I will say, one of the other reasons we don't ask for it in the essay, and we ask for it in a short answer, and we actually don't really lean on that in making decisions, because your post-MBA career interests are so kind of malleable, they change so much, it's such an unstable data point on which we would make a decision. So we don't really do that because we know so many people change their minds from what they say they're going to do in the application to what they actually do. Making our admission decision based on your career interests really doesn't make sense to us. So we do ask for it as partly for information gathering, partly for reporting, but also to the extent it's for for evaluation, it's not because we're evaluating and making value judgments about the career decisions you're articulating and saying, oh, this is a good path, that's not a good path. We're more interested in understanding your thinking behind it and what you've done. Again, similar to the commitment essay, what you've done to kind of support it and to prepare yourself for it. So we're more interested in your thought process in terms of how you approach issues and how you approach project problems, and less about the specific goals you see for yourself professionally.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like I've peppered you on this one before in some of the events that we've done together. So I'm really glad though that this is getting sort of into the podcast, because I know a lot of people are going to listen to this over the next year or even beyond. So it's great to have this advice here. Let's talk about the interview process at Yale. I know that you mentioned there's like a kind of a subcommittee that you have these sort of committees that are gathering to make the decision about whether someone's going to be invited to interview.
Yep.
But tell me about like how does the interview itself work? Who does somebody interview with, and how, like, what should someone do to prepare if they're fortunate enough to get invited?
Sure. And I'll say, an interview is required to be admitted, as it is, I think, at many schools. But we don't interview every single candidate. We interview, depending on the year, anywhere from maybe around a third, I would say, of our applicants are overall are interviewed. It varies from, sometimes it's more, sometimes less, but it varies from year to year. And not being interviewed is one thing I would say. Not being interviewed does not mean you will necessarily be denied. We actually do waitlist a good number of people without interviews, just because there are constraints on the number of people we can interview, and we want to. Sometimes we have questions, we want to gather more information, and then that might be the case that later on in the year we do interview them and then admit them then. So it's just to be. So people don't get overly discouraged that if you're not interviewed, it doesn't mean you're automatically going to be denied. But anyway, so we interview a subset of the applicants each year, and the interviews themselves are 30-minute interviews. They are typically with trained second-year students. Sometimes the admissions staff does some interviews, but the majority of the interviews are with second-year students, even more so now during COVID, because we don't have on-campus interviews. We're not traveling to do hub interviews or anything like that. And so it's mostly sort of Zoom or Skype interviews with second-year students. The interviews are, and they are trained. Actually, we have a whole process of sort of training and touching base. We have David Crusoe, for example, in the Yale College Dean's Office, who helped with Peter Salovey, the president of Yale, who developed some Mesquite. It's the Myers-Salovey-Crusoe Emotional Intelligence Test. He's a social psychologist, and he really is really good about helping our students sort of get in the right mindset and understand how to minimize bias, and really sort of train them to be as consistent. One of the things we really care about is having as consistent experience as possible. So that's why for us, the interviews, they're 30 minutes, trained second-year students, but they're structured in nature. They're not unstructured interviews. We know that from lots and lots of research that unstructured interviews basically have very little sort of predictive validity, and so that's why we have our interviews are structured, which means that everybody gets the same questions in the same order, asked in the same way, which might sound a little more rote, but it's actually, it's but we feel it's more fair to the candidates. And the questions are, I kind of gave you a little bit, we do ask the why Yale, we ask a little bit about your post-MBA career interests. We ask some behavioral questions that ask how you handled certain situations. So you think about, in terms of how to prepare, you should know your story, review your application, review your resume, and be able to pull out experiences of things, of successes, of failures, the typical kind of interview questions that you think you might be asked in a job interview. You should be prepared for. There are no curveballs, no trick questions. We're not trying to kind of sort of fool you or make you do any sort of market sizing calculations or how many golf balls can you fit in the Empire State Building or anything like that. They're very, very straightforward. It's not meant to be a painful or difficult experience. It's really more just to get to know you more and in a different context. And then, as I said, the student will write up the interview report. It'll get added to your file, and then it'll be considered as another data point as we make decisions in decision committee. And I guess that's one final thing I would say about the interview is people do get, I think, very anxious about them, get stressed about them, and I think it's the last thing that you do that you have control over before you kind of you kind of have to finally sit and wait for your decision. I think people think it's candidates think it's a kind of an up or down. Like if you do well in the interview, you're in. If you don't, you're not. It's not at all the case. It is just one more data point. And a lot of times we're looking for specific things or trying to get a little information. It might confirm certain things we're seeing in the read, or it might help us debunk certain things kind of rebut certain things we saw elsewhere in the read. So a lot of times, as much it's for kind of shaping our impression or helping us get more information that it will help us understand you better. And it's not about a yes or no, up or down kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Again, lots of really good advice there. And I think you're right. People, they because it's the last step of a process, often they feel like it's the final decision maker, but it sounds like it's not at all that. It's just another data point, which is good to know.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, Yale SOM happens to be part of a university, Yale University, which, is known the world over. But I'm wondering, how do you all take advantage of that? Because it's obviously Yale University is this large, institution with so many different graduate schools and a, really prestigious undergraduate. I mean, it's just, but how do you guys, tap into that?
Yeah, in many, many ways. I'm really glad you asked this question because it is one of the things I think that is really special about the Yale SOM experience. And it's one of the real advantages of coming to Yale SOM is you do come to Yale. And, it's obviously one of the most eminent universities in the world.
Yeah.
So it's a great place to be. But actually the school and the university more generally does a lot to try to encourage interactions across the university, which I think makes a big difference in the student experience. And we do say very much when you come to Yale SOM, you come to Yale. And so, some of the ways in which that manifests itself as a student, how your experience here will be shaped and influenced by our being situated at Yale is that first of all, when our MBA program is a full-time 2-year MBA. The first year is mostly the core curriculum, but you start to take electives in the spring of the first year, and your second year is entirely electives. And you can, at Yale, you can take those electives anywhere at the university without limit. So you could theoretically take all of your electives outside of the School of Management. Those would all count towards graduation. And it's, I know some schools talk about, certain number of electives you can take outside of the business school, but at Yale SOM, there's no limit. And it's great because, if you wanted to do, one of the examples I give, for example, if you wanted to go into real estate finance, there are lots of SOM courses you could take, but you could also take classes at the environment school about sustainable development, and you could take classes at the law school about real estate law, and you could take the course at the architecture school about design, and there's so you could really sort of amplify your SOM education in so many meaningful ways. So that's one aspect. There, those kind of connections exist across the university on different levels, not just academically. And again, the university does really try to make Yale tries to make the whole university as sort of porous, as permeable as possible. So there are clubs. There's actually the Schwartzman Center, which is a new graduate hub for graduate students across the university, on Central Campus. There's a graduate student bar, Gypsy, which are Griffin's Pub, I think it's called now, which has lots of activities for students to get to know each other. One of my favorites. I've told this story before, or this anecdote before, so I apologize for repeating myself. But one of my favorites is there's a mixer between the law school and the medical school that's called the ambulance chasers mixer, which I think is just kind of fun. But that's the kind of flavor of how that Griffin's Pub. But then more seriously, there are there's for example, the healthcare conference that we have at SOM is run collectively by the SOM students, both our MBA and EMBA students from the medical school, public health, and nursing. So all working together to put together the healthcare conference. We have Sci-City, the Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale, which is founded by Joe Tsai, who's the number 2 at Alibaba and was Yale College and Yale Law School. And that's a sort of an innovation hub at Yale. It's an entrepreneurship suite. There's a maker space. There's a lot of sort of stuff happening around design thinking. And that really brings together students from SOM and the law school and the med school, engineering and undergraduate and computer science. So those are the types of things that happen across the university. I could go on. I probably have gone on too long, but there's really a lot. And it gets me excited because I think there are, among business schools, there are some schools that are kind of either standalone because they don't reside at a large university, or de facto standalone because they do, but don't really interact with that university in a meaningful way. And we're at the other extreme. And I think it really does influence the experience here.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm beating a little bit of a dead horse because we talked about this a little bit with like is the school stereotyped in some way, and look at the stats on where people go afterwards. But the same thing is here. A lot of universities will say, or a lot of MBA programs will say, oh, you have access to the whole university. You can take some elective courses. But then when you read the fine print, it's like 1 or 2 classes is all that you could possibly do. And so I think people listening should definitely take note of, what you just said, which is that it's sort of limitless. You can do whatever you want across the institution. So that's really interesting, and I think somewhat unique from at least from what I've encountered historically at other programs.
No, I very much agree, and obviously I'm saying biased, but I do. It does seem like it's a difference of not just degree, but of kind. Like it's just the extent to which the university is open to you, not just academically with the unlimited number of electives, but all the other things that are happening across the university. I think is really, really fantastic.
Yeah. So we're going to shift gears here for this next question in an entirely different direction. And I want to ask you about your Silver Scholars program,
Yes.
which is for college students who want to get a head start on the MBA. And it's, some people would put it in a deferred enrollment bucket, but it isn't really because, with Silver Scholars, you go right from senior year, typically in university, right into the first year curriculum of the MBA, and then you get a break for a year to intern, and then you come back. But I wanted to know who should focus on that accelerated path to an MBA at Yale, and what would you say about like if someone's trying to decide whether it's right for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is typically Silver Scholars, as you said, Graham. It's not truly deferred admission because you do go straight from your undergraduate to us at Yale. So I mean, it's overall a 3-year program. So you do the first year core with us, you do an extended 1-year internship, and then you return in your 3rd year to do the second year of the MBA, second academic year of the MBA program. So it actually gets you through more quickly. It gets you through, at the fastest. You can sometimes extend, the internship or do other things. So, but in its fastest iteration, you get through in 3 years as opposed to the longer deferred enrollment programs. And I think that the thinking behind it, not to go too much into sort of the theory and philosophy behind it, was that the first year having you come straight to business school after undergrad is taking advantage of the height of your ability to extract information from the classroom setting. Like you're at the peak of your skills at that point. So that's the most efficient.
Yeah.
Then you get the 1-year internship to apply those skills. And then you come back for the second year, then to kind of fill the gaps and kind of supplement with the things you learned on that internship, or what more you need to learn to be an effective leader. And so that's sort of the idea behind it. I think it's, in terms of who it's for and maybe any advice, we see people who do a range of things. We've seen people who've gone, obviously, more traditional investment banking, management consulting, but some who've done, been sort of entrepreneurship. Some who've done, even, when early, Silver Scholars have gone into, went into sort of publishing, and some others have as well, actually, as I think about it. But in the technology, CPG, so that it's really broad. I think the idea behind who it's appropriate for is if you really feel as though you have a little bit more direction. The MBA is often a time for a little self-exploration, self-discovery, and kind of figuring out, even if you have a sense of what you want to do, kind of figuring out a little bit more. I think Silver Scholars, if you have a little bit more direction, have a little bit more of a sense, maybe a little bit more impatient, I don't know, to get through it. Obviously, the opportunity costs are the lowest going straight through. The more you're out in the workforce, and the higher your salary, the more the opportunity costs to come back to school. So there is that efficiency perspective. I think some people combine that with having maybe a clearer sense of what they want to do. But it's really industry agnostic. It's not meant for anybody going into any particular area. Mm-hmm. We really do have we have dedicated career services resources for Silver Scholars to help you, because the 1-year internship is rather bespoke. It's not something that recruiters are used to hiring for. So we do have to do a little bit more sort of hand-to-hand combat on that front. And we do have to lean on both the Yale network, some individual networks on this end, also your network, and helping you kind of advise you on how to leverage those. So it's a little bit more tailored in that respect. But it is industry agnostic. As I said, it's not specific to any area. And then advice I have for candidates, as we're reviewing Silver Scholar applications, I would say we do tend to lean a little more heavily on the academic piece, your transcript and your test scores, because you don't have that full-time work experience. So just making sure those aspects are as strong as you can make them. Not that you should ignore them if you're not applying through Silver Scholars. But then the other piece is, because we don't have the full-time work experience, we do look for other things, internships, activities in college that will be kind of proxies for that. And so to the extent you can kind of highlight those as well, and especially how they might be, we might be able to get a signal for how effective you'll be as a leader from those, if you've been able to sort of lead an activity or had any sort of heightened internship opportunities. Those are definitely helpful for us as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's great advice. So I guess the last question I had for you is around COVID. And I think you sort of touched on this earlier.
Yeah.
So, I don't want you to have to repeat too much, but I just wanted to know, like, how are things going? What are the plans for, if any, campus visits eventually? Because obviously folks listening are largely prospective students. And so they're thinking of applying or in the process of applying. And yeah, just be good to know what you're hearing, because as you said, classes are back to being in person, but the other stuff hasn't happened yet, right? In terms of campus visits or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And Yale, I think, has been taking overall a cautious approach, but I think a smart approach. Connecticut has done very well in terms of sort of the COVID rates, and being one of the sort of the lowest rates in the country. Yale has done a really good job of keeping the rates down. As I said, the status of the campus status just went to green, so they're like red, yellow, green, and we've just transitioned to green, which I think is a great sign. It's based on the fact that I think everyone's doing a really good job and doing their part to stay safe and be maintain distance and mask wearing and all the things we need to do, and getting sort of vaccinated and ongoing testing to keep the rates down. Mm-hmm. And so we're cautiously optimistic that going into, we haven't been traveling, we haven't had campus visits yet, and we won't through the end of 2021. We're hoping as we go into 2022 that will change, and we're hoping to maybe reintroduce campus visits. I don't know when. There's a health and safety committee, both at SOM and university-wide, that that reviews these kinds of requests and makes decisions based on the prevailing conditions and the guidance of the university. So we're hoping, I think in the spring, that we might be able to begin campus visits. We're hoping in January, this is fingers crossed, that we'll get permission to do some in-person admitted student activities. Mm-hmm. Which would be great, which would be kind of a toe in the water to that. And then more that's more admissions oriented on the school level. As I said, you were right. I did touch on this already. You're restarting our international experience trip in spring, and the international experience activities, the Global Network Week, Global Network activities that we have typically every fall and spring is big, and hopefully opening up. I talked about the special event for students and partners, and hopefully in the spring there'll be more access, and we'll be able to welcome more people to campus on a more regular basis. And then I think at some point, again, getting back to admissions, we haven't done this since 2019, and we won't through the end of this year, but maybe starting in 2022 at some point we will begin to fold in travel, and we're really trying to find the and Graham, this, we talk, and we've done, we work together to try and think about what the right balance is between in-person and virtual travel going forward. The democratization of recruiting, I think, has been a positive thing, in the sense that we've been able to reach more people, and it kind of levels the playing field for people who aren't in major cities or aren't able to get to in-person events. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure we will have some in-person events sort of opening up in 2022 at some point.
Yeah, that makes sense, and is consistent with what other folks I've been talking with are saying. Sort of wait and see, maybe in the next calendar year. So I appreciate you going through all these questions. I've learned a lot. I mean, I feel like I've known you a long time and known your team and stuff, but I've learned a lot about how you guys do stuff. We have these, as you know, I did give you a heads up. We have these lightning round questions that we like to ask, so that our listeners can get to know you.
Yes.
And we do them kind of rapid fire. So if you'll humor us, I'll run through these, and again, these are just meant to be fun, and we'll just I'll fire away whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
All right.
Lay it on me.
All right. So the first one is coffee or tea?
Coffee, definitely.
Okay. Beach or mountains?
Yeah, I was wondering whether museum can be an option too. There, I'm a little bit more of a house cat, but I would definitely go with mountains over beach if those two choices.
Okay, now you've made me remember that Yale has the university has a fantastic art museum, which I would encourage anyone, when you guys do open up for campus visits, make that a little piece of although I'm an art history major from undergrad, so I'm wildly biased on this stuff, but
Yeah.
I remember visiting that museum. Are you a morning person or more of a night owl?
Definitely a night owl.
Okay. What is a pet peeve that you have?
Pet peeve. I'll have to limit it. I probably have a ton, but this is a very specific one, and this is born of, I think, of this past weekend having to deal with holiday traffic as I picked my daughter up from the airport and then brought her back, and this is a very specific one. I always am frustrated by when there's a kind of a mirror, like when there's an exit or kind of the cars are going off and splitting and everyone's lined up, and then that one person goes all the way to the front and kind of cut in at the last minute. I'm like, do you not? We all know where we're going. It's not like you're in any greater rush than the rest of us. We're all following directions, and you're kind of just off, kind of cutting in front of everybody else. So that's a very specific pet peeve that I've experienced a little bit over this past holiday weekend.
And you need to hang out with Blair Mannix, who's as you know, is admissions director at Wharton, because when I asked her this question, she talked about parallel parking, like people who can't parallel park really bug her. So yeah, both of you have these road-oriented pet peeves.
Yeah.
What about a guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure. Oh gosh. I don't have much time for many guilty pleasures right now. I do. I think probably I don't watch a ton of TV, but a little bit of when I get a chance to have do a little bit of TV watching, and a lot of times in various realms. I've been sports is always big, and I watched with my youngest, my son, we actually watched a show called Holy Moly, which is it's a mini golf themed competition, which sounds kind of weird, but it's lots of fun.
Okay. Oh,
so I guess that would be a guilty pleasure.
I have not heard of this. This is good. All right. So, What about what's your favorite virtue in others?
There are lots. I would say generosity is one that I always value and I always think is an important thing for others and self as well, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a good one. What about a happy place?
I guess this is keeping with my earlier comment in context of beach or mountain, but home is always a happy place, and I just being able to sort of relax and unwind. Got it.
What's your favorite comfort food?
Probably anything unhealthy. I guess I cannot. I guess I would have to turn in my New Haven card and my townie card specifically if I didn't say pizza, because New Haven is renowned as probably the pizza capital of the world, I think, to many people, and so I think that I kind of have to answer that.
Yes, I can confirm. In another life, I was on tour playing music in a band, and we came through New Haven to play, and I was taken to a place that I think is called Naples. Is it called Naples Pizzeria or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which isn't actually, it's no long. Naples is were you at Toad's place?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. So Naples was right around the corner from Toad's, and it then became Wall Street Pizza. It's actually no longer there, and that's actually among the sort of New Haven hierarchy, that ranked rather low.
Okay.
There was on the pecking order. So we'll need to make sure you get true New Haven pizza at some point.
All right. Good.
Not that it was bad pizza, but it was not the royalty of New Haven pizza.
Okay, good to know. All right, well, you'll steer me correct in the right direction next time I'm around. What's been one of your proudest moments?
I don't know. That's actually, because you did share this with me before, and I was trying to think. I was trying to think of some like big sort of crowning something or other. That actually the moment what came to me, the moment that I'm most proud of is, and maybe this is dovetails with my favorite virtue is when my kids do something selfless, and it doesn't even have to be a big gesture. I often my middle, so I have three, and so I mentioned my oldest, who's in college, and my youngest, who's my compatriot in sort of TV
moly.
watching. Holy moly! And other, that's not, we don't watch that a ton. I'm overplaying that one, I think, a little bit. But that was just, we just happened to watch that recently, so it was on my mind. But I think my middle, for example, when it's a small gesture, but when we having, had dinner the other day, and my mom was over, and there was like one last, I think muffin, and my daughter reached for it, and then she looked up and said, did you have one yet? And my mom said no, and she gave it to her. And I thought that was, I don't know, those little gestures I think are meaningful to me, and I was really pleased to see that she had that kind of mindset, that instead of just kind of grabbing and eating, she actually thought about who else had some and who else might want it more than she did.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. As a dad myself, like I definitely hear you there. And now I'm really glad you spoke about your middle child too, because if they listen, you would have been potentially in trouble for only talking about two of your children. So this is good. Okay, what about a superpower that you wish you had?
A superpower, yeah. I was going to say, I don't know if this is realistic, but then I realized that superpowers are inherently not realistic. So I don't know why I'm sort of drawing a line somewhere. But time travel is one I wish I always think of superpowers like invisibility or like X-ray vision or stuff like that, like in the moment. But if I could travel in time, I think that would be the most fascinating thing.
Yeah, I hear you there. What about, this is kind of an unfair question, but which part of your own school's admissions process would you most like to skip if you were applying?
I think if I were applying, this is partly me, and then I'm sure like applicants as well, is the interview process. I'm sure people just are not looking forward to that, and that's when we were talking earlier. That's one of the reasons I said it's only one data point. Don't get overly stressed. It's not make or break, because I think people do get very worked up about the interview, and I think it's actually, if anything, it's really an opportunity just to learn more about the school and have us see another side of you. So, but I can understand that's a piece that feels maybe more anxiety inducing. I think for me, it always was as well, and so I can totally empathize with that.
I'm thrilled that you said that, just because we've done a bunch of these admissions director chats, and so many people say, "Oh, the test, I wouldn't want to take." So so I'm glad that we get kind of a different perspective here. And I have one more question for you, and maybe the answer is going to be holy moly, but I wanted to know, what's the best thing that you either read, watched, or listened to recently?
I haven't been doing much sort of non-work related reading lately, although I haven't been doing a lot of work-related reading either. So unfortunately for the team, I would say in terms of, I would go with watched. It's not holy. It's in addition to Holy Moly. I'm not going to be sort of. It's a show. I don't know if you know. It's a show called What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh, I've heard of it.
There was a movie that there's a movie that it's based on, which I want to see the movie, but I've seen now the third season just wrapped. And it's about these vampires in Staten Island, but they're all about their foibles and their misadventures. And it's by Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi. And Jermaine Clement did Flight of the Conchords.
Okay.
And they were. It's kind of just really offbeat and just hilariously funny. And I'm really. So anyway, that's my, I guess, guilty pleasure. I could probably substitute Holy Moly for that. But it's a great show, and I do want to go maybe over break and actually watch the movie. They were in the movie, but they're now just the producers of the series.
Got it. Okay. Oh, that's a good recommendation. So Bruce, I'm sure that you have files to read and committees to get to and stuff, given the time of year, and I really appreciate you making time to do this. It's always fun to catch up. So yeah, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's always great to catch up.
All right. So everyone, stay tuned for more episodes of the Clear Admit podcast, and please remember to rate and review the show wherever you listen.